everyone. We are back to spoil more games. This is a special ATACS spoiler cast. And here today we are going to talk about Nier Automata. I am hosting this. I am Flex and from Raleigh, North Carolina. Joining me is Nate from Wendell, North Carolina, at least for now. How's it going, Nate?
All these spoiled games. It's gross.
I know. You need to keep them refrigerated after opening them. And we're really bad at that.
You got to check the expiration date when you buy it. Make sure you keep it well refrigerated. Otherwise, they end up spoiled.
I know. It's a real... my apartment's in a bad way right now. The smells are not great.
Yep.
Also joining me is our friend Garrison from Virginia Beach. I'm probably getting that wrong.
Yep, that's right.
Hey, look at that. How's it going, Garrison?
It's going great. So it is pronounced automata, right? I always wondered if it was automata or automata. I assumed automata, but...
I think it's automata.
Yeah, I've been going with automata, but I have no official, I don't know if that's officially right. I don't know.
Yeah. Whatever your heart tells you.
It sounds like we're all in agreement of automata, so that's I guess what we'll go with.
Sounds good to me.
That's the official ATACS pronunciation.
That's right.
So yeah, if it's not obvious from the name, we are going to be spoiling anything and everything about Nier Automata. Mm-hmm. I believe all of us, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe all of us have seen endings A through E, which are the 5 main story endings.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't think many of us have done a whole lot of side quests, just a handful here and there scattered.
Right.
I think I ended up with about 50% side quest completion, so I did a good chunk.
That's probably more than I did.
Yeah, it's probably more than I did as well. So we may touch on most of those, but I have a feeling this is probably going to center mostly on the main story through line.
Yeah.
But we are certainly able to talk about any side quests that we did see and how that affects things. And this is a good game to do a spoiler cast for because it is very is in a weird way very story heavy.
Yep.
It is on its face. It's a third person quote unquote character action game made by Platinum, so comparable to something like a Bayonetta or whatever else. But it's not as intricate on that front as those games are, and instead leans a lot into the story stuff. Famously, Yoko Taro heading up a lot of that direction. Mm-hmm. And I think they do a good job. And I think, I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think a lot of us like the game and its themes and a lot of its narrative stuff that it's going for. So we're gonna dive in, and we were trying to think of the best way to do this, and I think we're just basically just gonna kind of run through overview of the game. The 3 main story routes, I'll call them routes A, B, and C, which cover the main endings. So we'll run through those 3 routes and kind of just talk about what was going on. So kicking off, route A is the route you play as 2B, the android on the box, and you're joined by 9S for most of it. I guess first question, how did you all like 2B as a character?
So I think when I first started the game, I was having a bit of trouble seeing what all the hubbub was.
Yeah.
Because 2B starts off as very stoic, very robotic, even. And I was like, well, and she had 9S to play off of, but especially the getting 9S almost seems a little bit too juvenile. And so at the start, I wasn't really sold on this dynamic. So I was like, maybe this game is not going to be for me.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are very, one-note characters at the start, I think. 2B is very serious, we're going to get the mission done. I don't want to be your friend. And then 9S is, like you said, the kind of juvenile, happy-go-lucky guy who just wants her to call him Nines.
Yeah, the whole Nines bit was... I feel like they may have touched on that one too many times. But yeah, it is interesting because that whole Route A, and I feel like Route A is the route that like it comes off feeling like your more straightforward thing, and the later routes are the ones that kind of explore more of the nuances of it. But yeah, it's like Route A, it's like, yeah, she's your quiet brooding hero, then he's like the jokey sidekick. And like even the enemies like Adam and Eve are like really goofy.
Yeah.
Like to me, they're the most anime parts of this game.
Definitely.
Like they're probably the one part of this game I didn't really like that much, is just like them as characters were just I never really got them.
Adam and Eve specifically.
Yeah, Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
They were definitely the thing that made me say, well, I'm in a Yoko Taro game. I've only really played Drakengard, but I know enough of like how his games go to be like, wow, this is really anime.
Very much.
Yeah, even when you first meet them, it's like they somehow 2B and 9S are androids, and you're fighting a lot of robots, which apparently
they draw a very thick line between androids and robots early on in the game.
Yeah, which for me initially early on I was like, wait, what's really the difference here?
What is the difference?
Which I think is kind of the point.
Yeah.
Definitely the point, but I did struggle early on because I kept getting mixed up. Like, okay, there's robots, there's androids, but there's also the Yorha androids, which are separate from the Resistance androids because they're a very different kind of model, and like those distinctions, which I think were intentionally like, you're supposed to be like, oh yeah, these things are all kind of similar, but I also definitely got some confusion, even just trying to parse out some of the backstory.
Yeah,
it's confusing as to what was what.
Because it actually took me a few hours into the game, I think, before I realized that all the NPCs in your resistance camp were all androids.
Yeah,
I was like, oh wait, these aren't people.
Yeah, it took me a while to suss that out too, and it took me the better part of Route A to realize that, oh wait, this is just like all these differences are stuff they've come up with, and like quote unquote social things that the androids and robots have come up with between themselves. And because like the way it threw me off a little bit at first, because the way they talked about it, like I kept thinking like, okay, like there's got to be something more like there has to be a bigger difference here, like. But then as you see in later routes, like there is no difference between them. And I ended up appreciating the way that they like address that stuff, because it's like it was a little confusing at first, but at the same time, think about like, I don't know, if some alien species came to Earth and they saw like the different ways we talk about each other, like how like we might talk about there being a difference between like, I don't know, an American and a Japanese person or something like that, like different races, or and like you could totally see someone from the outside just being like, why is there a difference here?
So it is kind of interesting, and like they just kind of drop you into this world where there's this ongoing war for whatever reason between androids and machines, and Yorha are like the special forces of the android side, and that's what 2B and 9S are. So it is kind of like just dropping you into this conflict, and immediately meeting all these characters and trying to suss out like what is actually going on here, why are they fighting, who are they fighting. So that is what a lot of Route A was for me.
And it does kind of drop some of that backstory at you in these little bits and pieces, doesn't it? And I'm getting things mixed up because I played the game and I tried to read through like the wiki and get all the lore picked out, so I forget what happens when. But you don't get a ton of backstory. Like, I know like the idea is aliens came, but don't you not know about the aliens until later on, or am I getting mixed up?
You don't know that the aliens are dead.
I think you actually do learn that towards the end of Route A.
I think in the first cutscene of the game, like maybe not immediately, but like early on, I think they say something about aliens coming and bringing machines, and that was the start of this war.
Yeah.
I think that's fairly early on, but then later you learn that the aliens are all dead.
That's it.
Yeah, and I think that is in Route A when you learn the aliens are dead.
It is.
And you fight Adam and Eve again.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was probably one of my like early like narrative points that kind of interested me And I don't know if this is jumping ahead too much, but they do sort of set up the war between, the humans and their androids versus aliens and their machines. That's kind of like the setup, I guess. And humans and aliens are basically fighting this weird proxy war on Earth. And the only actual combatants are androids versus machines, but you never see the humans or the aliens.
Yeah.
And so in Route A, towards the latter half of Route A, I think they start revealing like, oh no, actually, androids and machines are just fighting each other.
Yeah, for no reason.
And the aliens and humans are all dead, and this war is just continuing for no good reason.
Yeah. And because I think it's near the end of Route A, you learn the aliens are dead, and I don't think it's till the end of Route B that you learn the humans are dead.
Yeah.
Until for most of Route A, I was just like, all right, this is just, and this is how they present it, is like, all right, this is a war going on between the androids and the robots or machines. And you don't really know why the war exists, but you assume there's going to be some reason.
Yeah.
And I feel like that, at least for me, made Route A feel like a very standard-ish action game. Because it's like, you're doing a lot of combat, you're doing side quests, you're upgrading your gear, you're, doing whatever that stuff. But the core underpinning is really just like, oh, we're fighting the machines.
Yeah, this is just a war. You're just a soldier. A lot of what you're doing, your main quest objectives, just feel very detached. And it's like, the machines are attacking. Go here and fight them. That's what it ends up being a lot of.
Yeah, and I think for a while for me that was, I fully understand why people could bounce off that game in Route A, because I think that story in its kind of straightforwardness is not always that interesting.
Yeah,
and it doesn't really do a good job of it doesn't. There's not a lot there to pull you a lot deeper to say, oh, I want to see more about this. I guess there's Adam and Eve, and even then, you don't really see them as much in the later. I mean, you see them in Route B, but there's not a lot to tease you to play on past Route A, except for me, because I knew that everyone's like, oh my gosh, you got to get to ending E. It's amazing. So if I didn't know that, I'm not sure how pulled I would have been to keep playing.
Yeah. For me, it's almost specifically that Nate liked the game as much as he did.
Right.
If it weren't for that, I'm not sure that I would have gotten through this game. It's probably more of just starting it. I don't know that I would have even bothered starting it. Because it's not really traditionally a thing I would start. I think they could. So I'm of two minds of it, because in a way, I think it would be nice if Route A somehow had some kind of tease, like Garrison said, or did something that indicated that we're going to explore this in more depth if you go further. But at the same time, the other part of me is I almost feel like it kind of needs that blander Route A to set things up to make the later reveals more impactful. And I'm not sure where the middle ground that actually falls. I'm not sure how much of Route A is necessary versus not, but I think there is some benefit to its its overarching story of Route A being pretty straightforward, because a lot of this game's themes, as we'll definitely get into later, is about just the little things that happen and how they kind of get reinforced over and over again. And I think Route A is kind of necessary to put those things on, it's kind of the table setting. It's putting those themes on the table. It's not really exploring them. It's not filling up the plates, but it is setting the table with those plates.
And I think what Route A did do really well is that it really pulled me into the world. I'm not a big fan of open world games, and Nier's kind of a quasi open world. But each area, I thought, was generally really interesting. Maybe not quite the desert so much, but for the most part, wherever you go, whether it's the music or the people you meet or what you're doing, they always make it really interesting. And so I did get that sense of like, I want to explore more of this world. I want to see more of what's going on beyond the city ruins, because like that's a really good hub world. You start branching out and you start seeing like, you've got the festival town that I forget the name of. You get to the
I think they just call it amusement park.
Amusement park, yeah, and you go to the forest. And
yeah.
Each new place you go is seeded with some really cool stuff, and I think that for me was the big hook of Route A, was just seeing these new places, and to some extent, to a little bit, the side quest kind of fleshed out that world, and we can talk about side quests more maybe later on. I don't know when the best place for that is, but they do kind of make the world interesting hook more than I thought the plot was, at least in Route A.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because in its quasi open world nature, I don't think like all the areas were mechanically interesting, but I think thematically I really did like seeing them, especially with like the art style and the music and that stuff. Like,
yeah, and just the general mood of the game.
I think without the music, it would also be a very different experience, because I think like the music, it's like the amusement park is cool, but the music with the amusement park, I think, really elevated it to a step above, where I'm like, wow, this is kind of like a really engrossing place.
Yeah, that music is so amazing. That's one of my favorite tracks in the game, is the amusement park. Like, the soundtrack is really incredible at just like, because this game really is about its themes, and I feel like the soundtrack does such an incredible job at just like setting the tone for those themes. Like, it somehow feels like the soundtrack emulates those themes perfectly in music form. It's crazy.
I think like you guys are saying, just the introduction to all these places and different groups and characters is probably one of the strongest parts of Route A. Like, we talked about how the main plot points are kind of rote and just military stuff, but you do start to get a feeling for the world, and it is through the music and the tone of it all. And the amusement park and Pascal's Village are two really cool areas that you get to spend some time in during Route A.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Were you going to say something, Garrison?
Yeah. So one of the things I was going to talk about is we've touched a little bit on 2B and 9S, but I think one of the other really good things too was they do a good job with the characters you meet. Like, even the Resistance camp, they're not like fully fleshed out 3D characters, but they do a pretty good job of making these characters seem interesting. And so most of the places along the way, you get to, I think they do a good job with those side characters, kind of making you want to know how they tie in, where their story's going.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the big characters you meet, one of the side characters in Route A, is Pascal, who later on ends up becoming a bigger character. He's actually probably my favorite character in this game.
Yeah, his whole arc is just so...
yeah.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we'll get... I guess he's more in Route C.
It still hurts.
Yeah. It still hurts.
But you do meet him in Route A.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're right. They do a good job at fleshing out this character. So
yeah, he's immediately interesting in this world of seemingly just war and destruction with no end or reason. He's sort of created this little collective of forest pacifist robots.
Yeah,
which is immediately endearing.
Yeah, and he's like flying around in his little floaty thing with a white flag.
Yeah,
and
your soldiers just
kill them all.
Yeah, your soldiers just like running into their territory, and they're like, "Nah, cool, we're cool guys."
Yeah, and he ends up like a really charming thing. Like, he ends up winning over like 2B and 9S, and later even A2, and it's like his just like chill pacifist ways like convert these androids to not, and he ends up working with you a lot.
Yeah,
he is a really endearing character, and also a tragic one.
Yes. trying to think of what other areas and people can we highlight from Route A.
So I need some help on this one.
Yeah.
I feel like I never understood the purpose of Adam and Eve.
No, I'm with you.
So like, I mean, the first time you see them is like somehow these robotic machines are producing these humanoid bodies.
Yeah, I mean, they're essentially more of what you would think of as an android, right? Like
that was my first question is like, are they technically machines or androids or what? Because like androids have some amount of like actual synthetic material. Is that right? Or like there's some like it's not all just nuts and bolts? Or am I just making stuff up?
I'm not sure in this world how much that holds up. So I think part of it goes back to the original Nier game and the way that like so the big conceit of the original Nier, and I'm probably getting this wrong and forgive me.
To be clear, none of us have played much of the previous games.
So you end up like splitting the person, like a human. Humans get split into replicants and gestalts, and I think both of them die out, maybe. But like, I think the androids are kind of a descendant of one of those things somehow. I went on this big lore binge, like as soon as I finished the game. I've already forgotten all of it. I'm trying to go back and look over what Adam and Eve are, because they are something different.
Yeah. So
at least
they definitely do. The way I kind of thought about it, that made sense, at least somewhat in my brain, was like androids were created by humans to model humans, right?
Yeah.
They're basically emulations of humans, but mechanical.
As humans were like dying off, they created these to.
So the machines are different. They were created by some alien race that was trying to wipe out humanity, or for whatever reason attacking.
Yeah, they don't even really, at least that I noticed, explain what the aliens were trying to do.
No, I mean it's probably just something simple like trying to colonize a new world or something. But who really cares, right?
Yeah.
So they just have these like robots that are more basic, mechanical, like either just soldiers or just like worker class for the aliens, or who knows what purpose they serve. But it's very like basic and mechanical. Like they look like little, like I don't even know, like
they look like trash cans.
Yeah, little trash cans with legs. Yeah, that's a good way to describe them. And they don't have like. What I read it as is as designed by the aliens, they don't have any sort of emotions or like capacity to like grow and learn the way that humans do. They just do their job, right?
Right. They're the worker bees.
Yeah, they're the worker bees. So I think how I read it was after the aliens died and the machines were kind of leaderless, they started to adapt and change in ways that probably they weren't designed for.
You're right.
We assume.
Yeah.
And they only then the main role model they probably had at that point, the main like thing they had to look at and say like, oh, this is another thing that exists is the androids.
Right.
So I kind of took it as like, the machines trying to evolve and change to be more like androids, which then produces something like Adam and Eve.
So they definitely, it was a new style of machine life form.
Mm-hmm.
I believe what it was is that they got a hold of some human data, and I think for Adam and Eve specifically, it was like, oh, here's the Bible, and Adam and Eve and I think parts of this leak out in the beatery when you see those weird scenes with Adam and Eve at that table.
That scene is one of the weirdest scenes in the entire game.
It is very strange.
It's like these two like mostly naked like robot people trying to like read the Bible and scientific books and learn of human behavior and all this stuff.
So Adam reads the Bible and he kind of takes that as like his model for being human.
Mm-hmm.
So he eats apples because apples make you smarter, and so it is the new machine, the new evolution of the machine.
Yeah.
People, and I think I forget specifically as to why. I think he in particular becomes curious about humans instead of being created to be more human-like.
True. Yeah.
But I forget the sequence of events. I apologize for getting things wrong.
Yeah, that's fine. We're all not lore experts on Nier here.
Nope.
But yeah, I don't know what the exact mechanism of their creation was, because he just kind of plops out of a weird goo sack.
Yeah, because it's a bunch of little robots running around, and then they crawl into a ball together, and then somehow within 5 seconds this humanoid shaped robot pops out, and it's how did they do that? How did they just create this out of thin air?
Yeah.
And then just doing some quick reading, I think what it looks like is that he was created by the terminals, the things you fight at the end of, or toward the end of the C route, I believe. So they were created, he was created by them, and to get more data, especially on the androids, and prepare for their quote-unquote final attack.
Right, okay. So it all kind of relates back to that very late game stuff.
Okay. Yeah, and I was gonna, my final question with them is kind of what was their goal or purpose, because they just seemed to I don't know, be kind of a loose cannon in some ways.
Yeah. I don't know that they personally probably had much purpose other than kind of like Garrison was saying, just being curious and wanting to learn.
Yeah, because they
be anime as shit.
Yeah, that's the real answer.
Because when you first encounter them, you're in the desert, and I forget which one of them, but you fight one of them for, again, no real reason. There's a lot of fighting that happens in this game for no real reason, which is kind of the point, I think.
It's kind of anime too.
Yeah, and then later on, he one of them captures 9S. And that's when you end up killing one of them. And after that, it makes sense, because then the other one just gets on a revenge raid.
Yeah.
Adam is the one that you kill, and then
Eve just goes insane.
Eve goes crazy, which also I think parallels and probably foreshadows 9S.
9S going crazy. Yeah, that's a good point. So why did Adam capture 9S? I guess, was that just another thing of wanting to learn more about the androids, or was he studying 9S, or?
That's my guess, but I don't know.
Okay.
Believe so.
That's fine if we don't know. It's just, I think pretty much the only plot points that I was confused about in this entire game revolved around Adam and Eve.
Yeah, they don't make a lot of sense, I don't think. At least on the surface. There's probably some underlying stuff there that we're not catching, or we forgot some details that might help, but I think they are a little confusing and weird.
Yeah, they were by far the most confusing part of that game to me.
But I do love, one of the things that I really like about this game as a whole is how so many different characters, different machines and androids, adopt and cling to these weird ideologies, or thinking about the way the world works or the way things should work, that are inherently really flawed, or they get very basic stuff wrong.
Yeah.
I want to hold on to that thought for much later, because I think that
there's a lot more of that later. Yeah,
that comes into play with the ending. But I think so much of what you see in this game, even early on, is that it's just all these different attempts ultimately to be human, and kind of how that manifests. And then for Adam and Eve, it's very much about conflict. I think they explicitly make the decision that being human means fighting a lot, and so they just decide to to fight a lot.
Yeah. And then like you said, they kind of get a hold of something to do with the Bible, and get names out of that, but somehow don't realize that they both took on male forms, and then they named themselves Adam and Eve. So little details like that just they're really good. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that stuff is good. I think one of my favorite characters who you do meet in Route B, who is trying to take on human stuff and not doing it right fully, is Simone, the boss in the amusement park. Because she's like trying to like internalize and like take on that beauty is an ideal to strive for. Which you could totally see how you pick up that from observing humans. And she like adopts it in this really twisted manner. And she's a boss you fight, if I didn't mention that. And I thought she had a really like, she's one of those few characters you see that like takes this aspect of humanity and like twists it to an extreme in a grotesque way, and is just like, it's one of those really good moments of like shining a light on like how simultaneously how difficult it is to like adopt other traits when you don't understand it, and also kind of highlights how pointless some of those traits are.
Right.
I think especially when I first started Route B, I was kind of sour on having to play the whole game again, but that fight with Simone and playing it from the 9S perspective and getting those extra layers of like detail to her was the first time where I was like, okay, Route B actually has a lot of cool stuff to offer, and like adding that layer of depth to Simone, and like there's not like, it's all very quick, but what was before like a pretty generic boss all of a sudden is like this really fascinating, compelling character. And I think that was really one of the strengths of the game, is that of the B route especially, is that like playing this game again, which again I'm not entirely sure was necessary, but getting that extra vantage point on things like Simone and even on things like Adam and Eve, and seeing more of like, holy crap, these machines are actually really, really complex characters, and not exclusively trying to kill the android and nothing else.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think that I generally agree that, like, mechanically speaking, I don't think Route B is necessary to play through the whole game again, or at least the main stuff. But I do think it is, it is when the game, we said Route A was a lot of table setting and like just laying the framework there, and then Route B is where they basically force you to revisit a lot of those points and then start peeling back the layers of like, oh no, actually there's more going on here. Than you originally would think. Whether they could have done both of those things in one playthrough, I don't know. But they certainly could have. They could have tried.
Yeah, and there's always the question of like, did they do that to get more mileage out of the assets they made for Route A, or was it the narrative intention from the start? You always have those questions with multiple playthroughs in video games, or at least I do. Sorry, you about to say something, Garrison?
Yeah, I'm still not convinced of the necessity of excuse me.
Yeah, me either.
Of Route B, but I think from a narrative standpoint, like, yes, when you fight Simone, you could have maybe gotten that little cutscene of her backstory in Route A, but I do think it's more impactful after you go through Route A. You're basically just like, okay, I'm fighting the machines are bad guys, except for Pascal's village. All the other machines are basically these killing machines. Then all of a sudden you get to Route B, and it's like, wait a minute, maybe this is not quite so black and white, and maybe even these like machines that we thought were just mindless killing machines, they actually too have these very human feelings and desires. And I think having that kind of pause between your first encounter and second encounter, I do think makes it that much more impactful. And I don't know how you could do that without like that second playthrough.
Yeah. I actually really, I actually might have enjoyed Route B more than Route A, because I think, and yeah, I don't know if that was the best way they could have done it, but I definitely think there is something to be said for I guess it's like it's almost like an interesting like narrative teaching technique, because I think if they had tried to give you all the information from both routes A and B, if they had tried to giving you all that in a single, run through those areas, I think that would have been too much to really digest and internalize.
Yeah. I think a lot of the nuance would be missed in that.
Yes. And I think by using Route A to lay the groundwork, to like give you the basics, like introduce you to the world, introduce you to all the players, like really get that basis set up, I think allowed them to Route B, when they're going through all those same areas and characters and everything, that's when I feel like they really layer on the themes. It's like, all right, the field is set, like the setup for everything. Now we're going to show you like now we're going to introduce all the like populate all of that with the themes we want you to take away. Whereas I think if they had started and had those themes up front, like it would have been harder. Like you said, a lot of that nuance would have been lost. And I think, and somewhere in Route B was where like the game really started gelling for me and being like, okay, like I'm understanding now what this game's going for, in a way that I was not getting in Route A. And like, that's kind of surprising given that, yes, it is revisiting like 90% of the same stuff.
Mm-hmm. I think this might be a place to talk a little bit about the mechanics. And so when I started, I had gotten the recommendation from you guys saying, don't really worry too much about the side quests because they're generally not all that great. But when I started Route A, I was like, well, let me just go ahead and start trying out side quests. I think what you all said was, or what I read somewhere was to do the side quests until they stop interesting you, and that might be very quickly. So I did Route A, and Route A took me a good chunk of time because I did start out by doing a lot of these side quests until I finally got to one where it was like, oh, you should race this robot, and I'm like, I'm not going to waste my time. So for Route A, I was also spending a lot of time on these different side quests, and so while I was annoyed at Route B at having to play the game again, by that time I had gotten it down to much more of a science, so there wasn't a lot of like wasting time that there was in Route A. So Route B went a lot more quickly, and so instead of having this long, drawn-out experience again, the fact that you can very easily streamline it much more easily, and especially with 9S's hacking ability, makes a lot of even the boss fights really trivial. So you can make Route B go a lot more quickly if you want to. So it can be over before you even get bored with retreading the same stuff again. And there is also a lot of new side quests that open up and a lot of new things, I think, for people that do want to explore the world further.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I definitely agree with all of that. And yeah, I mean, my Route B was also way quicker than my Route A.
Yeah.
And I came out of that feeling like I had a much better understanding. And so in Route B, you're playing as 9S instead of 2B.
Right.
Through the same period of time. And most of that is doing the same stuff. But you do get some important revelations at the beginning and the end of the route, because that's when you're separated from 9S or 2B.
Yeah, I did appreciate having those moments where, like, I remembered from Route A, like, oh yeah, they're separate at this time, and now I get to see what's going to happen with 9S during that time, and that was a good thing for me. And I also did enjoy the hacking minigame, generally.
Yeah. I did too.
I was so bad at it. So bad.
I think that was harder than the actual like third-person action.
Sometimes it was, yeah.
But I enjoyed it more. It was simpler, but it was, it was basically like a dual joystick shooter.
Yeah, it's a top-down two joystick shooter kind of thing.
Yeah, but I thought it was fun. And it did kind of make some of the bosses pretty easy because you just do that over and over.
Yeah.
But yeah, and you get some pretty important revelations, especially towards the end of Route B, when you're when 9S, I forget what led him up there, but you're on that station, the Yorha station, and that's when you learn that humanities doesn't exist anymore, and all of that's like kind of a big cover up, basically.
Yeah.
Like he's the one by himself who gets that revelation.
I can't remember the exact sequence of events that leads up to that, but I do remember having a feeling going through all of that where 9S starts to realize that, like, you know, this war is just a big facade and, like, humanity is actually gone. And then there's all this, you know, the end of route action stuff going on with 2B on Earth. And then like that sort of leading up to the ending of Route B just felt like a big climax that was really enticing, and and then you get this cool teaser intro for Route C.
That was really
like full battle gear.
Yeah, she looks like a stormtrooper, basically, like some kind of. Yeah, that stuff was really well done.
Like that ended up like leading from routes A and B into like, okay, now things are happening. Like this is going to be something.
Yeah. That was I like that last, I don't know, 2-ish hours or whatever it was of Route B was like, that was the moment. I mean, I was already pretty invested during Route B, but that moment towards the end was really like, all right, like they're really going for it here, and I'm totally into this.
I think it's worth dwelling on the fact too. I know we did play Nier, but that revelation at the end of the B route that, oh yeah, by the way, humanity's not actually on the moon. They're all dead. Like, that also has a lot of impact for the original Nier. That, like, oh shoot, after everything that happened in Nier 1, all of humanity died. So it's, I do respect, you know, Yoko Taro for he's willing to carry through his stories, and as weird and as dark as they get, he follows through, and that is pretty cool. And it did make me actually want to go back and play the original Nier. I'm not sure I'll actually get to it, but that was pretty cool.
Yeah. So we didn't really talk about the ending of Route A.
Yeah.
Which is also similar to the ending of Route B. And I'm debating if I want to talk about it now or when we get to C, because I almost think it has more implications for C. But
could you remind me, like, I can vaguely recall, like, the final sequence of Route A, Route B, but I don't actually remember the specifics, so could you refresh my memory?
Well, so Route A ends with fighting Eve.
Yes.
Yep.
So your 2B and 9S fighting against Eve in the city ruins, and then, like, I guess as soon as you kill him, 9S starts to go haywire.
Okay, that's it.
And 2B strangles him to death.
Yeah. So there's been this virus or whatever infecting a lot of the models, the Android models, and I feel like they played it off because he was doing all that hacking, like he was like in closer contact with them or whatever. So
he was corrupting his internal code or something like that.
Yeah. So he ends up starting to go insane, and as you find out later in Route C, it's kind of 2B's job to kill,
to execute him when they go haywire.
Yeah, when they go haywire. So that's kind of her purpose.
Yeah.
And I guess what's interesting to me about the way routes A and B end is, well, there's actually a handful of things.
So I need a refresher on B. Does it end the same way?
I think it was pretty much the same. Yeah.
I think this part I remember a little bit more. So you get the logic virus, or 9S gets the logic virus, I think, and then he can't back up himself, but he can help 2B back up herself.
Right.
And then, 9S is on the bunker, but it's just not 9S does end up recovering all of his. Because I think wasn't it that like you were going to lose the backup of 9S, who at end of Route A, you're like, oh my gosh, the 9S that you've been bonding with all over this game, he's going to lose all of his memories of all those events, and that's kind of like the great tragedy of A Route, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so there's this whole concept in the game of the androids can like upload their memories and experiences, and even if their bodies die, their memories get loaded into a new body.
Right.
And there's something with that virus that prevents, like, because they don't want to upload the virus. So
right. So they can't be backed up once they get it.
Yeah. So 9S, once he gets that virus, like 9S will still exist, but they have to use they can't update his memory, so they have to like revert him back to an older memory pre-virus.
Yeah.
Isn't what 9S does? He gets the logic virus. He can't back himself up, so he ends up like he jumps into a machine instead. I think that's what it is, and that's how he gets into the that main your server, the bunker, and you want to find out about humanity.
Yeah, and at the I feel like he learned about humanity even before then, but you might be right. Some of the like exact ordering of that stuff I don't remember perfectly well.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact sequence, but sometime during the end of Route B, he learns about that stuff.
Yeah, and he kind of stays like hacked into that stuff. So structurally, what's fascinating about this to me is like whenever they do this black box thing, it's kind of a reset in a way.
Yeah.
And at the end of Route A, when 2B is choking out 9S, she starts talking about cycles and how like she has this line, it always ends like this.
Yeah.
And I thought that was those themes end up becoming more apparent in Route C, at least to me they did.
Right.
But it was an interesting way to reset. Like, I mean, that's the very end of Route A, and it reset into Route B.
Yeah, and then you redo some of the same stuff.
Yeah, and true to form, it ends like that again. So it plays like she's foreshadowing, it always ends like this. And there are moments during Route B where you're like fighting through enemies, and like 9S says something like, man, this is such a pain. And he's almost meta commentating on how like grinding through all these enemies is like, it's just kind of tedious.
Yeah.
Because it's like as you're fighting through enemies, and like I think like there were parts on Route B where I started getting the sense of like, all right, it's in a way part of the game's theme that there's a lot of, I mean, there is repetition in fighting these enemies, and there's also a kind of a pointlessness to it. And I think a lot of that ties into the game's overall themes of cycles and purpose and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Especially, I forget how explicit the game makes it versus some of the expanded lore, but if you dive in to that, you realize that like this has been happening over and over and over again. Like 2B, and I guess we can talk more about that in the C route, but this whole 2B having to kill 9S, the A route is not the first time that's happened, and it's even before the game starts. So this idea of cycles, I think, is a really important one. And I think part of why I love the game so much is that like that's a theme that's always really fascinating to me, is like cycles and how we break cycles. So
yeah, by the end of Route C, and we'll talk about this more in Route C, but I came away thinking like that is the central theme of the game, is cycles.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one.
Yeah. I also think it's really telling that I don't know if either of you picked up on this, you don't get a title card until the start of Route B.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Yeah, like at the beginning. So one of the differences at the beginning of Route B is you're controlling one of those little machines.
Yeah,
like
that's
carrying
a great
bucket of water.
scene.
Yeah, and I think it's right after that scene is when you get the title card for the game.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, which is really fascinating to me because that goes back to what we were saying earlier about how Route A is kind of, it's the table setting, it's just the introduction.
Yeah.
And like Route B is kind of when the game begins.
Yeah. It's like Route A is just the prologue.
Yeah,
like,
basically.
Chapter 1. That's crazy.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also interesting that they kind of like, despite 2B being like kind of marketed as the main character,
yeah,
you only play as her in Route A.
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of pull that rug out from under you at the beginning of Route B as well.
Yep.
So we've talked a lot about routes A and B, and we're going to take a quick break here and refresh and come back and talk about Route C, which gets really wild, and the endings C, D, and E. And stay tuned. We will be right back.
Buckle up.
Welcome back to our ATACS special spoilercast episode for Nier Automata. I am Flex, joined by Nate and Garrison, and we have been talking about Nier, we've been spoiling it, we have talked about how Route A sets the table, how Route B starts serving up the good stuff, and then now we're going to talk about Route C, which drops the biggest quadruple decker chocolatey pound cake whatever you've ever seen and just goes completely nuts.
I like this metaphor.
Yeah. I just came up with it. You like it? So yeah, Route B ended, as we talked about, with 9S learning that the humanity, like all of that was a sham, like the humans have been dead for a long time. Yorha is just basically exists to keep morale for the androids and keep them doing stuff for who knows what reason.
Yep. And we didn't even touch on the fact that there's like a server just like on the moon.
Yeah.
Like sending random emails to the Yorha soldiers.
Yeah. To make them, like all of those messages from like human command that you get throughout the entire game, it turns out, those have just been set up on some weird automated server to make you think they're still alive.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And so Root, and then 9S also starts going crazy at the end of Route B as he's learning this stuff. And so Route C starts off with 9S in not a great way, and then also apparently the machines are just like, for whatever reason, launching a full out assault.
Mm-hmm.
Can we before we go into deeply, it might be worth spending a minute or two talking about so we talked about what we thought about 2B and 9S at the beginning of the game, but by the time you get to the end of Route B, I feel like both of them have become a lot more complex. So, what do you think about how they evolved throughout the game, or throughout the first two routes? Let's go with that.
I mean, they certainly go on a journey. I mean, you get a lot of like what could be, I guess, considered like pretty standard character development, where they grow to like each other more, and they start to like be a little bit more personable and jokey. 2B is a little less like hard-edged by the end of all that. So I do think they sort of grow in that straightforward way.
Yeah.
I think 9S becomes a lot less grating and more interesting with the logic virus stuff that's happening to him, and like him being more involved in like these dire revelations. Sort of keeps him from being the jokey sidekick after that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, through Route C, he is not jokey at all.
No, he's not.
He's like...
he kind of goes all the way to the other end.
He's the opposite of jokey.
Yeah, 9S has, in my opinion, by far the biggest character growth of any character in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Like 2B, I don't actually feel like 2B is always doing her mission.
She is.
And like, yeah, she becomes like a little more hardened, or maybe like, I don't know what the right word is for it, but like, she almost seems to like feel like she almost seems to be like the one that's like, all right, I don't know what there is outside my mission anymore. Like, I don't know what the point of anything is. So I'm just going to keep doing my mission. Like, she seems to just latch onto that as her one purpose.
Are you saying she feels like she's losing hope in her body and her soul and the sky?
Maybe. I might be saying that.
Oh, boy.
Whereas 9S, like, 9S is legitimately insane by the end of this game.
Yeah.
And I mean, but you can see how those events would do that to someone. And in a way that makes him like one of the most human characters of this game, is because like he is seeing all this crazy stuff happen and it's very clearly affecting him dramatically. So yeah, I think they're interesting. I don't know how much I like, quote unquote, like them as characters, but like I think the roles they serve in the story are really well implemented.
I really liked 2B because I like how she opens up over the course of the game, and you do get a bit of a kind of a glimpse into that. She, beneath that rough exterior, I think even she kind of, I think especially as you view the game through the lens of like all of these different people. I'm getting a low red bar. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah, you're chopping up some.
Sorry, I don't know. My connection's terrible. But as you view the game through the lens of like all these machines / androids that are very deliberately not human, the different ways they manifest humanity, and like, I think at the start, 9S just seems a lot more human because he is jokey. He is sort of. But you do start to see, even like with 2B, you start to see her open up, and even she kind of, has those very human characteristics. So she's not a completely emotionalist at all, but there is more depth to her. So I think watching that open up, watching her start to care for 9S and kind of say it a bit more clearly, I think was really cool to watch unfold.
Yeah, you also get the sense that there's a struggle because like 2B knows her, like that she's going to have to kill 9S.
Yes.
And you can kind of see her hesitation to open up and become closer with him, knowing she's going to have to kill him. So like you can kind of get a sense of that internal struggle with her as well.
Yeah, like how many times has she gotten to the point with him where she wants to like heed his wishes and call him nines and then has to murder him.
Yeah, and then that sucks.
Yeah.
And even like all of the admonishment that she gives him early on, it kind of takes on a new meaning after you start to see, like, I feel like the game will reward multiple playthroughs, not just like Route B playing through Route A again, but like after getting all the way through Route E, playing the whole game again, there's probably a lot of really subtle foreshadowing, like the way that that 2B admonishes 9S. It's like, oh, she's trying to stop him from being curious, because if he gets curious, she's going to have to kill him.
Yeah, once you kind of know the true nature of that world and their relationship, like a lot of the stuff that happens early on, like takes on a new meaning.
So here's my big question about 9S and the logic virus.
Okay, before we get to that,
and
I don't know if what you were going to say to touch on that, but just like one last thing on their relationship, 9S and 2B. Because 9S, he's like some kind of like, because like 2B is a soldier and she's always around other soldiers. 9S is some kind of scout or something.
Yeah, I forget what his designation stands for, but there are different models of android that are built for different tasks. Scout, yeah.
Yeah, I would guess the S is for Scout. But point being, he's basically, and he says this at some point in the game, like he's basically always on his own. And and when he's working with 2B, he's like, oh, this is really nice that I'm around someone else. So like you can kind of feel that need for connection he has. And then there's that, like the really quote unquote famous line in the game, is you're hacking into something. And I forget exactly who says this to you, but there's that line that 9S gets that's like, you want to ...
Yeah.
TV, don't you?
Yep.
And there's a whole lot of different ways to read that. The actual, I don't know what your guys' first reading on it was. The consensus on it actually seems to be that 4-letter word is kill.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Which kind of makes more sense when you get to the end of the game, because A2 basically tells 9S that he knew all along that 2B's purpose was to kill him. Kind of deep down, but it's almost like 9S didn't want to believe it. So he was like kind of repressing that in a way and being like, no, she's really my friend. She would never kill me, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then like subconsciously, it's almost like if you read that line as kill, then it's like he would kill her before she has a chance to kill him. At least that's kind of how I read it.
Yeah, I mean, my first read was definitely like, oh, you want to pork 2B, don't you? But I think going back through it, you can definitely read a different way. I think, again, that does add layer and ambiguity, and it just makes what was kind of at first just like a, haha, that's not really funny, but like, no, they really did that. But it's like, wait a minute, that could actually mean a lot of different things that all fit really well.
Yeah. If you read it as your first gut reading, which I assume a lot of people probably did as well.
Probably, yeah.
Then, it's kind of a funny thing, and like that would play into like a lot of anime tropes, I suppose. But it also, like in the context of that game's story, doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Not really.
And I think that's where the other readings like Hill start to make more sense. And that seems to be the most generally accepted one. But I guess point being, like, there is, like, as their relationship evolves, like there is a lot going on there.
There is.
So, all right, you were about to transition something else, Nate.
Well, I was basically going to get you guys' take on sort of the nature of the logic virus. Because I don't, and there's probably details in there that I either don't remember or I missed. But I didn't come out feeling like they gave me 100% explanation for what the logic virus is, or why it happens, or things like that. I mean, I think they kind of talk about how the S-types are more prone to it because they're curious.
They're hacking.
Yeah, and they're always hacking.
Yeah.
But, like, I guess, did you guys get the sense that it was just a true computer virus that corrupted their programming? Or is there something else to it? Because I think I initially thought, it's just definitely a virus that makes them go crazy, right?
Yeah. That was kind of how I read it, which is maybe the face value reading of it.
Yeah, I feel like there might be something more there that I haven't quite worked out.
There probably is, because there's something more to almost everything in this game.
And the only other thing that I could kind of zone in on a little bit was, like, maybe the androids that were, more curious, more adventurous, like, more, like 9S, like a little bit more human.
Right.
Maybe they were more, like, prone to some sort of evolutionary leap that kind of broke them out of the Yorha system of control. Does that make any sense?
So you're saying maybe the virus is to prevent breaking out of that control?
No, I'm saying the quote-unquote virus is not really a virus, maybe.
Oh, it's not actually a virus.
It's only branded as a virus that makes them go insane by Yorha as a measure of control.
Right.
Yeah, so there's actually a one of the reports you can get in the game talks about how. So basically, I mean, part of the big twist that happens probably in Route C, maybe it's Route B, is that like, this battle between the androids and the robots, the machines, neither side's actually supposed to win.
Right.
Like it's supposed to just happen forever. And the logic virus is kind of built in to Yorha to basically prevent them from ever discovering the truth.
Right.
And basically, so once the Yorha units become, I guess, sufficiently advanced and probably good enough at hacking that they can break into the system, logic virus is supposed to wipe them all out, and the battle data is supposed to be saved, basically, so the next generation of Yorha units can be built, so on and so forth.
Okay.
And I think the ultimate culmination of Yorha is supposed to be like making more human-like people, but that might not be correct, actually, so I don't want
to... that seems right.
Yeah, because there was all that, because in Route C, you get a lot of that Project Gestalt info dump stuff, and I think it was a lot to digest at the time.
Yes, it is.
But what you were saying lines up with what I remember from that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wrong, actually. Because the Yorha is Yorha is never meant to stick around, because that was why they were made with the machine cores for their black boxes, that like they were always going to be expendable.
Right.
So maybe it was to help the androids ultimately become more human or something. I don't remember.
Yeah, that part was confusing for me as well.
Yeah, and some of those details probably don't matter that much, but it was confusing. But it sounds like the logic virus is in some way a means of controlling Yorha soldiers as they become more advanced, which is kind of what I was thinking, but not quite the same thing.
And
so anyway,
at the beginning of Route C, that virus starts affecting like everyone.
Yeah.
And that's basically how Route C opens, is the machines launch a big assault while simultaneously, like, almost all of Yorha is getting affected by this virus.
Mm-hmm.
So you even end up, like, you fight a bunch of machines, and then a lot of the Yorha turn against you.
Yeah.
And you have to fight a lot of Yorha soldiers.
Right.
And then eventually 2B herself becomes infected.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you have the trade-off with A2, where 2B basically, she like transfers her memories into her sword or something.
Anime.
Yeah. And gives her sword to A2, and A2 kills 2B, and A2's supposed to carry on 2B's mission.
Right.
Which I guess, I don't know why A2 is like the one character who never gets infected by the virus.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's because she's like been disconnected from the Yorha network for so long, or what.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Yeah, that was kind of my guess, is because she basically exiled herself a long time ago.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, I mean, that virus pretty much takes over all of them. So I guess, like, with our theory, that's like, maybe once they learn that humans are no longer there, that like kind of breaks some spell or whatever. I don't know.
And like Garrison was saying, I think it is, the Yorha are expendable, and as part of the cycle, they kind of just get wiped out and then start over, right? That's kind of how the cycle restarts over and over.
Yeah.
And we'll get to how that may happen when we talk about the very end, but but yeah, a whole lot of stuff happens right at the beginning of Route C, because as you're having that handoff to A2, you also have these giant towers that rise up everywhere.
Yeah.
Which I don't know exactly what triggered those or anything like that. I assume that was some construct from the aliens. I don't know if that's correct or not, but
I think so, because like it seems to come from that weird, like, I don't know what it was called, but like that weird white city that Adam and Eve go to.
Yeah.
And like these towers come out of that, I think, and are kind of connected into the weird whatever AI or whatever kind of machine it was that lives in the tower and supposedly created Adam and Eve. So there's some kind of alien technology, I think, behind all of that.
Yeah.
So that's the Ark, which is supposed to be this giant super weapon, and then in practice turns out to not be a super weapon.
Yeah. So you spend pretty much all of Route C trying to get in, and you bounce back and forth between, after 2B dies, you bounce back and forth between A2 and 2B, or 9S names. And A2 plays a lot like 2B did.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get into that tower predominantly.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of the guts of like their, because you do a lot of like kind of standardist tasks again to like get into the tower and stuff. I think the one scene we really need to talk about is the Pascal scene.
Yes.
So this is part of your like as you're playing with A2, you end up going back to Pascal's village, and she is very skeptical of Pascal, as 9S was originally, but Pascal ends up kind of winning her over as well with his charming pacifist ways. And all throughout Route C, the machines are like kind of on a rampage. Like they're just kind of attacking everything.
Right.
I don't know if like there's some analogous version of the virus going on with them where they're just like going berserk basically.
I would think so. Like if this is a war that's not meant to end, then both sides eventually just like reset to a position where the war can continue.
Yeah, that was kind of my read on it, is like as the virus was going on with the Yorha, a similar thing was going on with the machines, and that was putting them in this almost berserk state.
Yeah,
I think it's once you kill Adam and Eve, I think that messes up the machine network, and that throws everything all into.
That's right. Yeah, because there was because Adam and Eve were basically keeping their network in check or something. Again, the details elude me, but something about them not being there, like things got out of whack.
But yeah, point being, like the beginning of Route C is very apocalyptic.
Yes.
Like basically everything is going wrong. Everybody's fighting. The world is just kind of falling into chaos.
Yeah. There's some really stark imagery in all of that too.
And 2B dies, and A2 kind of takes up the mantle and is trying to figure out what role she's going to play in all of this. 9S and her are both trying to get into the tower. And then she crosses paths with
Pascal. Paths with Pascal, and I forget initially why they did, but anyway, she's like working with him on stuff, and machines end up attacking Pascal's village.
Yeah.
Which is a machine village
with child robots and
so Pascal takes all these children who he's been like basically teaching, and they go to the whatever that facility from the start of the game is.
Abandoned factory.
The factory,
Yeah.
And like the scene of them, the village getting attacked and them fleeing is like harrowing.
Yeah.
Like all these machines are like eating each other.
Yeah.
Definitely some surprisingly grotesque imagery for they're like trash can robots. So
yeah, and it's like, why do robots need to like? There's no like biology there to where eating a robot makes sense. Like,
it's clearly not a functional thing. It is like no, they're just completely gone off the rails. Like
So you spend a lot of A2's part of that route, I think, actually just like fighting off the machines that are going crazy. And like her turn from like wanting to protect Pascal and his people was I thought kind of touching, because like she was this big loner. It's like, she was this loner android who didn't want to do anything with anyone.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't talked much about A2 as the character yet, so this might be a good time to.
Yeah, like she was part of some attack force, like long time ago, and like a lot of the other people, from what I remember, a lot of the other people in her crew died, and she got kind of disillusioned with Yorha, so she basically just set out on her own, and was, kind of, she basically was not part of Yorha for a long time and was kind of seen as a threat by Yorha, but she's definitely like a loner, and it's pretty unclear what her goals are throughout a lot of the game.
Did she discover the truth about humanity, or was she just disillusioned by like all of her friends getting destroyed?
Definitely the latter, but might also be the former. I can't remember if she knew about humanity or not. It might be both. But yeah, she was totally done with Yorha, because you had that part in Route A where you crossed paths with her, and she was talking about Command being kind of the real enemy there or something. But yeah, like the turn from her going from that like extreme loner state to actually caring about Pascal in that village I thought was kind of interesting. That Pascal could win her over like that. Like that almost to me felt like her getting a vision of like, oh, this could be a way to live that's not insane. Seeing Pascal and how he ran things, and then of course that all goes horribly, horribly wrong. But
yeah, I think it is good to watch, kind of like 2B, but to watch A2 gradually open up over the course of this story.
Yeah.
Because she's a much harder edged person than 2B ever was, and she's just off in the forest doing her own thing. She's killing lots of machines, right? That's kind of, so like she pops up in the forest and kills the quote unquote forest king that's just a little baby, and so
which really, we don't need to get into those details because that'll be another rabbit hole, but the whole forest king stuff is also ridiculous.
But she hates machines, I think, to an extent that you don't really see in 2B or 9S at first, and then to watch her kind of open up to Pascal, and then it all goes horribly wrong.
Yeah. I like her, actually. Like, in some ways, like you said, has a harder edge than 2B, but I almost get the sense that's more from just like world weariness, and in some ways she has like 2B feels like she just has a programmed objective that she's following, whereas A2 feels more like she's operating on her own accord. So in some ways she felt like one of the more like individualized characters in that game, because she wasn't fighting for anyone else.
Right.
Did you like A2, Nate?
I did. I felt like they kind of teased her a lot early on in the game.
Mm-hmm.
When she just shows up randomly, or you'll find like random notes about her. And for a long time I was just like, I don't understand what this person's deal is. And then she kind of kills 2B, and I still am confused about whether 2B was expecting that or not.
The 2B asked, like, basically asked A2 to kill her.
Okay, I can't.
So 2B knew she was infected with the virus and going insane. So she basically uploaded her memories to her sword, gave it to A2, said, "Kill me and finish the job."
Right. Okay. But yeah, I ended up liking A2 just fine. She did seem, like you were saying, kind of like she had just been around and like seen all these different sides of everything, and kind of was making up her own mind about things more than a lot of the other characters.
Yeah.
Which was cool.
Yeah, and then as Garrison was saying, she kind of opens up to Pascal, and I think now we have to talk about the Pascal scene.
Right. So they've left the village in ruins, gone to the abandoned factory. And still like swarms of machines basically everywhere trying to kill everything.
And Pascal, this pacifist.
So the pacifist Pascal is trying to protect the children of his village and like all his townspeople that he's been working with. And
he finally decides he has to fight.
Yeah, he decides he has to fight to protect them from the hordes of incoming machines outside of the factory. And like goes kind of bonkers with it, and
you have this ridiculous, anime scene of him like taking control of one of those giant, I forget what they're called, Goliaths maybe?
Goliath. Yeah.
Yeah, he takes control of one of those giant things, and you control that during this fight where you're just having this punching contest with other Goliaths.
Yeah, and just mowing down like all these machines and huge vehicles coming across the ocean to the factory.
It's such a satisfying sequence, but there's also there's just so much emotion behind it, because you're like, oh my gosh, Pascal is just, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And he's just losing it. He's decided that this is the only path forward for him and his people.
He's reached the breaking, like, pacifism cannot get him any further.
Right.
Like, he has reached his breaking point.
Yeah. And then you go back inside after this fight. You
successfully won the fight. Like, Pascal went Super Saiyan and killed all these machines and saved the day.
All your machine buddies are safe, right? In the factory?
Nope. So one thing we I don't think we quite touched on was that, Pascal in his village was sort of a spiritual leader as well as like a practical leader of the village.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of a Gandhi figure.
Yeah, and he was trying to teach the other machines. Like, I don't think we necessarily get a lot of insight into how Pascal had his sort of awakening,
right,
to like larger emotions and empathy and the idea of pacifism and all that stuff. But he's trying to teach these other people in his village that he has removed from the machine network.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say he found a book, and that's
okay.
I can check on that.
No, I mean that sounds reasonable.
We'll go with it.
But he's trying to instruct these other machines in the ways of empathy and like emotions, and so
one of those emotions is fear.
One of those emotions is fear, and so during this fight at the factory, all the other machines got scared enough, like, that they didn't want to be eaten like they had seen all of their friends eaten at the village, and so they just committed suicide.
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
And so Pascal comes back in with A2 to this horrific scene of all of his disciples and friends and family members just
like
dead.
Swords through themselves. Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest gut punch in that game. Like, 2B's death, also pretty rough.
Yeah.
But those robots just, like, again, you're spending this whole game fighting the machines, but you also really come to care for Pascal, and Pascal's village, and, like, the village is already lost, and so, but you think, well, at least we can save, these children.
Yeah.
And then you go and you just like, well.
Yeah.
And Pascal does everything in his power to try to protect them, even breaking his own code of ethics. Yeah, and it's still not enough.
Yeah, he goes to the ends of the earth and even breaking the one thing you think he won't break, and it's still not enough. And like, it's like, yes, 2B's death was a big scene, but it's also like she's a soldier, so like death is constantly around her.
It is a different thing.
Yeah, and this is like basically a group of kids, if you can designate machine kids, who all kill themselves. It's like
just horrible scene of like sadness and loss.
Yeah, and then Pascal does not.
And then the game says, and then
go ahead.
Breaking up a little bit,
maybe. So Pascal is completely terrified or like horrified at what has happened. He's like, he basically immediately is like, there's like, this is terrible. Like, he basically cannot handle what has just happened. And he wants you to either wipe his memories or kill him. I don't remember which.
I think he asks you to kill him.
He asks you to wipe his memories.
Okay, I couldn't remember which one.
It was one of those two. But you do have three options. You can wipe his memories, you can kill him, or you can just walk away and force him to live with what he has seen.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, none of those are great options.
Right.
They're all bummers.
So what did you guys do?
I wiped his memory.
Yeah, me too.
I wiped his memory.
Okay, so we're all in agreement there.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel great to do that, but
so
none of the others feel great either.
Yeah, I mean,
which wiping his memory leads to another messed up thing later. If you go back to his village later, he's back there with no memory of what happened. He will happily and joyfully sell you all of those body parts for those machines that committed suicide because he doesn't know where they came from.
Yeah, he's just like, I don't know. I found all these things here, all these parts, and it's just, oh gosh.
But yeah, I think that whole Pascal, like that entire sequence is full of so many interesting things and nuances that like really speak to that game's themes, which is a lot of like all these entities trying to find their place and purpose, and it never goes the way you think it will.
Right.
And there's always a catch. There's always like something unexpected. Like, you know, he didn't think teaching these children fear would produce that result. So it's like just a complete lack of understanding of how things work and will go and all of that.
Yeah, and I think it acknowledges the basic idea that like any worldview you could have is flawed. Like, there is no right answer for life.
Right.
He's the very opposite extreme from Adam and Eve. They're like, oh, well, we just gotta fight a lot. And Pascal's the opposite, but like both of them. And again, it goes back to kind of this overarching theme of like, what does it mean to be human? And like, you know, pacifism and, you know, extreme, whatever you call Adam and Eve, like conflict, pro-conflict, like both of them just end in really bad places for all those characters. So I think that's a really interesting thing, and like, it's heartbreaking.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because I mean, so much of this game is about fighting, and it, like, I mean, the game, I feel like very clearly is like, oh, all this fighting is kind of pointless, and why are we killing each other? That like, but I appreciate that it also like Pascal is that other extreme of pacifism and says, oh, hey, it's not just the fighting that's flawed. There's flawed in this other view too.
Right. Yeah.
So it hits all the extremes. So yeah. So
meanwhile, while you're doing all that with A2, we've got 9S, who has not taken 2B's death very well. So so I guess to set that stage, you know, A2 kills 2B, and 9S comes in to see the end of that.
Yeah, he sees that.
Yep.
And he's not too happy.
Nope. He pretty much just goes full on insane at that point and is more or less driven by getting revenge and killing A2 because he doesn't understand why. He just saw A2 kill 2B and he doesn't understand why that happened or that that's what 2B wanted.
Right.
And he didn't know that 2B had the logic virus, right? He never saw.
I don't think so.
Wasn't around for that because they get separated on the attack during the attack, and that's when 2B gets the virus, and so
but yeah, I forget why he wants to get into the tower, but he's spending a lot of Route C trying to get into the tower.
I can't remember if he's just going there because he thinks A2 is there or what, but yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter. Both of them end up trying to get into the tower. Both of them end up in the tower, and I don't really have a need to like go through all the details of how they get there, but the last obviously big chunk of this game to talk to is what happens once they both get there and you have that ending chunk.
I think one quick thing to highlight is, so during this part of the game, you're switching off between A2 and 9S, but we haven't really talked about the pods, and they're really important characters. So while this is happening, you know, throughout the game, you've got the pods, which are kind of not unlike Navi in Ocarina of Time, just kind of like, you know, helping you with game mechanics, helping to guide you, and they're more so than anything else, they're pretty robotic when the game starts. They're pretty much just straight up objective, maybe a little bit of sarcasm, but they end up, so 2B has a pod and 9S has a pod, and they're exchanging data back and forth throughout the game. And then when you split up in these different paths, 2B, and then it becomes A2's pod, and 9S's pod are still exchanging information. So I think that's important to highlight, especially going into the finale.
Yeah. And those pods kind of develop their own personality.
They do, yes.
As it's going on, which fits into a lot of the stuff we've been talking about of these machines and androids gaining personality. If we don't have anything else specific we want to talk about in Route C, or they both get to the tower.
Let's do it.
Yep. So A2 and 9S eventually get to the tower. They climb it. They fight a bunch of machines. 9S even hacks in and finds these weird AI in the machine network that's controlling a lot of stuff.
I think that's worth mentioning too. Is that the tower is kind of like the center of the machine network, right? Isn't that the implication? Is that
I think so.
9S wants to get to it so we can just stop the machines entirely because we destroy the tower is supposed to become a cannon. It's going to blow up the moon. That's going to be really bad. So it's kind of like the now or never final assault.
Yeah. Yeah. They both go through all of that. There's definitely a lot of fighting. And they get up to the top and they kind of have they kind of cross paths a few times along the way, but they
usually with just 9S yelling at A2.
Yeah, it's usually 9S
just ignoring him trying to get to the top.
Yeah. Which in some ways, I think there's a lot you could read into 9S's transformation of going insane and what all that means, but we don't have to get into that. But yeah, they eventually get to the top and they kind of tag team to kill this really big bad machine that's basically the final boss.
Right.
And then you basically pick one of them, and they end up fighting each other finally.
Yeah, they're going to have a duel on top of this tower.
Yeah. Is the very last fight of the game, and you pick who you want to play as in that duel. But it kind of, the difference between them is not really that, you end up doing, one of them is ending D, one of them is ending C.
Yeah.
But you really do both, and that's how you get ending E. When you do one and you get one either C or D, you can reload and chapter select, and you basically just go right back to that fight and do the other one.
Yeah. And do they both die in both C and D?
No, in one of them they both die, and in one of them lives, and I forget the details of that.
So, if you choose to play as A2,
right?
A2 kills 9S, and then the tower collapse. And I think it's kind of implied that A2 is probably going to die along with it, but it's not made explicitly clear.
Yeah.
In 9S's ending, he kills A2, but he falls on his own sword, I believe.
Yeah.
And so he's about to die, and you get that weird sequence with the tower is revealed as it's not actually going to shoot the moon. But it's going to launch the machine data into space. So you get the consciousness of Adam and Eve coming back, and I think they've gotten less crazy, and they offer 9S a chance to go with them. He can upload his data onto the Ark, is what the tower ultimately is, and go off into space with them, or he can stay behind and, I believe, die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And both of those endings of those fights are pretty brutal, pretty gut-wrenching to watch.
Yeah, especially the one where this is Garrison was talking about when 9S falls on his own sword. It's it's almost like the full extent of like him just going insane is like he is so not in control of himself that like even when he kills A2, like he can't like
manage to
function
keep
properly
going,
enough to avoid killing himself.
Yeah.
9S might survive if you pick A2's ending. I think A2 cures him, and she like takes on his logic virus. I think 9S survives because that's what 2B wanted. Maybe I don't remember.
Okay,
I need to play this game again now.
Yeah. So either way, they're both dead or in a bad state, basically.
Yeah.
Regardless of which one you like, I think the details are not super important on that. They're both in a bad way, and from there it's kind of the pods that take over. So the two pods that Garrison was talking about, like they're witnessing all this. They're kind of learning and kind of gaining sentience in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And they so after all this happens and the tower crumbles, I guess, and all the main players are basically dead.
Yep.
They're basically just like, hey, what do we do with this?
This seems bad.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the credits in a second, but the post-credit scene is basically the two pods carrying parts of, I think it's 2B and 9S, and they basically like carry them to a safe spot and rebuilt. And the implication I got from that was like, all right, they're starting again from a fresh slate, and let's give this another go.
Yep.
Right. So again, going back to cycles, the cycle is going to begin again.
Yep.
And
although I think at this point it's also a little bit different, because I think with the destruction of the tower, I think the machines are basically finished. Well, the machine network is finished.
Yeah.
Although there is, we can talk about this at the end. There's a little bit of extra hint in some of the weapon lore. If you dig into that does imply that at least the machine network is going to reform a 1,000 years maybe.
Yeah.
After the game. So that cycle may or may not begin again, but it's unclear as to what shape that might take.
But at least some part of the machine network, some major component of it, gets shot into space.
Yeah.
Which is also like in its own way like a super interesting like ending to that like existence, I guess, of the machine consciousness. Like, all right, this place sucks. Let's like go on a voyage.
Yeah.
And see if we can find anything worth anything elsewhere.
Yeah. I forget exactly where this happened. I think it was somewhere in all of 9S's hacking, because he ends up coming across a lot of stuff when you're doing that. Mm-hmm. But I feel like there was somewhere where you come across something about Adam and Eve talking about basically just like jumping on this shuttle and rocketing themselves out into space. And it's just like,
it's so silly.
Yeah, it's so silly. But it's also a great image of just like, I just imagine Adam and Eve, like, just, you know, like, I don't know, space cowboys just like riding around, like, let's do this.
Yeah. And like, and it is kind of silly, but it also like sort of makes sense with everything, like from their perspective and how they think about things. It's just like, I don't know, let's go find something else to do. Like,
yeah. And it's ridiculous. So in the middle of all this, you have the credit scene. And this is the credits of this is the ending E credits, which are different from all the other credits. Yeah. So there's a handful of pieces of nuance to this, but the main thing is you're basically like the hacking mini game. You're basically playing that with the credits.
Yeah.
So you're controlling that same little thing, and you're shooting the same way you would in the hacking mini game, but you're shooting the names in the credits, and those names in the credits are like shooting bullets at you.
Right.
And basically the construct is that the pods are like, wait a minute, this is not okay. Let's go on a suicide mission and give the story a better ending. So you're literally fighting you're fighting the game itself to like change the ending. I think is a really kind of clever way to present it.
Yeah, because you've seen the credits multiple times at this point, and it always starts back over because it cycles. It always continues. It always ends like this. And this whole ending E credits is trying to break that cycle.
Yeah. So I think it's sort of like loosely about like, this whole system of Yorha and the server on the moon and the machines and all that is like just this big construct for perpetuating this endless war. And so the pods are like, actually, we're smart enough now. Let's see if we can break out of this system, and which is then, sort of presented in the form of you rebelling against the code of the game or the designers of the game.
Yeah,
because it's kind of a crazy two-layer thing.
Yeah, I mean the game definitely gets really meta at this point, and like we've talked about growth in the characters of like 9S and 2B and A2 and maybe even Adam and Eve and Pascal and like some of the side characters. Like we've talked about a lot of their growth, but a lot of theirs feels like was still part of the system.
Yeah, a lot of it was still part of that for sure.
A lot of that growth was still keeping within the checks and balances of all that system and all those cycles, and it is just this endlessly perpetrating war meant to just go forever.
Right. So this is when the pods say, no, we're going to get outside of the system.
Yeah, and they seem to be the ones who have like been observing all this and gathering it all and have like achieved some higher level of sentience that like sees the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I think, earlier you were saying that like 9S gets like the most character development, but I do think it's actually the pods that are really the ones that like, because I think at the start of the game, it's easy to look at them and just think, they're like Navi. They're just like there to help, give you tutorials and some that kind of thing, give you objectives. And then, by time Route C rolls around and they're exchanging data, they're starting to become characters that have a little bit of personalities. But then it reaches that point where it's like, I feel like I kind of knew it was coming because I had been spoiled, but like, at the end, I think you probably don't expect them to do anything, and all of a sudden, the pod 42 is like, "Let's change this," and other pods like, "We can't do that." He's like, "Sure, we can. We'll go on a suicide mission," and just plunges in. So I think that in a game where so much of it thematically is focused on what it means to be human, the fact that the final expression of humanity is these pods that go on this selfless suicide mission just to save, 2B and 9S and A2, like, that to me is what makes it so powerful, is that they just come out of nowhere, and they're just like, you know what? Even if it kills us, we're going to save them. We're going to make things better. And I just think I get a little teary-eyed just thinking about it. It's so beautiful.
It is presented really well.
Yeah.
And then that's, again, like, built into the structure of how the end credits sequence works.
Yeah. Yeah, so then the way it plays out is you're fighting these credits. At some point, it becomes basically impossible.
Yeah, they make it so difficult that you could almost not do it.
Yeah, like, I'm sure some crazy person out there has done it by themselves.
I'm sure.
It is possible. So, like, if you aren't connected to the internet, you can get through it, but I think you're also losing out on half the experience at the point.
Yeah. So, like, as you, like, start dying over and over because it's, like, impossibly hard.
Yeah.
The pods keep asking you, they're like, hey, is this worth, like, are you sure you want to try again? Like, is this worth, like, and they start asking you, like, some kind of ridiculous questions.
Yeah.
Do you think games are silly little things?
Yeah.
Do you think everything is meaningless?
Yeah.
And you have to respond to all of these to keep playing.
Yeah, and you have to keep saying, like, yes. So, yeah, here's a few of the lines. Do you admit there is no meaning to this world? Is it all pointless? Do you think games are silly little things? So you're just constantly getting these pop up, and you have to keep basically agreeing that you're going to keep trying.
Yeah, even though it seems impossible.
Yeah, even though it seems impossible. And while you do this, in the background, there are messages from other players.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them are, I mean, some of them are kind of goofy. Because, it's just whatever players enter.
Mm-hmm.
But the vast majority of them are like, you can do it, keep going, like that kind of that kind of
we're in this together.
Yeah. So, and you keep going, and if you keep, basically agreeing to go further, you end up getting help from those players. So
they offer to help, and if you accept, then they like puts a bunch of other players around your character.
Yeah. So you end up just becoming this super powered thing that's like you can take way more hits and you shoot a bunch more bullets. Like you're basically unstoppable. And I think your bullets start like plowing through the enemy bullets and getting rid of them. So like once you do this, you are just like you are completely unstoppable.
Yeah.
So and you just really like blitz through the credits, and the music plays a big part of this as well, because when the credits scenes start, it's like okay, whenever because you've seen at least 4 credit scenes at this point, because you've seen at least endings A through D, and for all of those you have this song that plays called Weight of the World, and I think it always plays in a randomized language because they did that song in like every language this game is in. But when you start this ending E credits, it's like a chiptune version of that, like almost like the hacking mini game, because you're playing it kind of like the hacking mini game.
Yeah.
And as the credits advance, it like starts adding in some vocals and stuff. But like once you get the full everyone around, it like evolves into this like full choral like community, because it was always one voice before, but now it's like multiple voices singing it together.
Yeah.
And it gets a lot louder.
Yeah.
So like that's a really powerful moment. And yeah, you end up beating the credits at that point, and then the pods are like, hey, we might have broken the cycle, and then that's where you see him carrying 2B and 9S and kind of rebuilding.
Yeah, and I think the scene with them like saving 9S and 2B's bodies and all that after that credit scene does play as like very hopeful, and like this is a new age that's dawning kind of scene.
Yeah. For as often as like dire and dramatic and like just horrifying as this game can be in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like I think its ultimate end message is very hopeful.
Extremely.
Yeah. And that's again why I love that, like it's that ultimate act of selflessness from the pods, and then from the player too, unless the player's a terrible person.
Yes, we should clarify how we didn't mention this. So those players that join and help you in the credits, they have deleted their save file. So when you get through it, the game asks you, hey, do you want to delete your save file to help out another player?
Right. And so presumably the network for the game is populated by players who have chosen to sacrifice their save file to help other people get through. And so it gives you that choice too.
Yeah, and when you choose, I think all of us did delete our file, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
If not, get off. I don't want to associate with you anymore.
My friend didn't do it, and I'm like, are you kidding me?
I don't know that we can be friends anymore.
Yeah, this is a real test of your morality, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it's not lying either. Like like because you have access to a chapter select if you don't wipe your file. So like you could go back and, replay some stuff and complete some stuff if you wanted. But
and there's a lot of like extra stuff in the game that requires like extensive grinding. Like there's really high level like arena stuff, like DLC content. So like you have to, be willing to sacrifice either your opportunity to do all of that, or all the time you invested in doing that. So
I also love the like very elaborate way it goes through deleting.
Yeah, I was going to say that too.
Yeah, it like very just methodically goes through your menus and like shows all of your gear and your weapons, your chips, all the options. Like it very like methodically deletes every single piece of that UI.
Yeah, it goes through and turns everything off and trashes it all. It doesn't just say, okay, yep, we deleted it. It's just like, it makes you watch it delete all the stuff you've worked for.
Yeah, which is kind of like, if as long as you're not some completionist who really did want to go back, like it's kind of a cathartic thing of just like, just let it all go.
Just let it all go. None of this matters.
None of this matters. I mean, and it is kind of a feeling of breaking from the system.
It is.
Yeah, you're letting go of all of that crap that you had been keeping up with through all those playthroughs.
And the only reason you're letting go of all that is to help somebody you will never know.
Yeah, you will never ever meet this person.
Yeah,
the game makes it explicit. It's like,
yeah,
this person will never know. It's probably someone you'll never know. It might be someone you would not get along.
Yeah, it might be someone you hate.
Yep.
It goes through like a half dozen of those things of like really making sure you want to do it.
Yeah, it's such a cool message. Yeah. And like an amazing way of portraying it. It's just like, no, like at the end of the day, the thing that humans and gets us free of all the bad stuff that we struggle against is like, hey, watch out for each other. Like,
yeah,
you're helping out a fellow person is all you like. That's the only thing that ultimately can save people and make people's lives better, is like being willing to help.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that like the ending moment is the moment where a lot of that comes together, because I think so much of this game is about, we've talked about, they discover the aliens are dead, the humans are dead. Like what is, and like so much of this game is about struggling with purpose and what is like where does any one person find their place and purpose, and there's also a lot about like connecting with others is hard. You see 2B and 9S's, like their relationship is so weird, and like they have a hard time connecting with each other. And there's so much of just like feeling like an insignificant speck who doesn't matter to anything in this big, complicated world. And there's so much of that in the game.
And like whatever your ideologies are, there's going to be flaws to it that cause harm that you don't intend, and like all the stuff we've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah, and there's so much of that throughout the entire game, and the ending moment is the one moment where it's like, all right, you might be like an insignificant speck who has no place or meaning in any of this, but right here, right now, you can connect with someone else and help them, and that's how we're going to get through this, as if all of us are willing to do that.
Right.
It's really optimistic for a Yoko Taro game where, for the most part, things generally end really badly. Yeah. Like in Nier, all of humanity ends up dying, and like I think you don't find that out until Automata, but even the ending of that game are pretty much a downer. And they do a similar mechanic with sacrificing your save file, and then Drakengard, it's the same thing. It's just like bizarre endings, and apparently Nier falls off the most bizarre one, where you wind up in modern day and your dragon gets shot down by some fighter jets. And so like for a director who's not known for like positivity or happy endings, and there's a lot of really sad stuff in this game, so it's not like it's a happy fest, but it does end on that optimistic note, and it kind of, in part, because empowers you to be part of that by saying, are you willing to help someone else get this happy ending?
Yeah, and it is a really powerful and positive moment, because I mean, from what I understand of, like, I haven't played his other games, from what I understand is like he does have kind of, I saw some quote in an interview of him where he was like, someone asked him if he thought humans would have a happy ending, and he said something like, I don't see how a species that's been killing each other for thousands of years can have any kind of happy ending, something like that. So like, I mean, you see that a lot in this game of like the cycle of, fighting for no real reason, portrayed in this game. But he also said, I think in that same interview, of like, things are big and messy and complicated, but what else are we going to do? We might as well try to do something good. And you see that shine through in the credits as well, as like, all right, here's that spark of positivity and hopefulness that maybe something good can come out of all this.
Right.
Whew. Yeah, and I think once you see the ending, like Garrison said earlier, it would be interesting to replay the game, like kind of knowing how it ends now.
It would be,
to see all the subtle things that
you gotta do the entire thing all over again.
Yeah. Well, I think that hits pretty much the high points. There's obviously things we haven't talked about, like we didn't really talk about any of the whole Forest King stuff.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about, like, what was it, Devila and Papala?
Papala, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have a whole story with them. We didn't really dive into the side quests. Like there's definitely things we haven't talked about, but I think that might be like a good. I mean, we've been talking a while. I think that might, and I feel like we've covered the big arcs.
Definitely.
I'm going to ask for some final thoughts on the game, but before I do that and we wrap it up, is there any burning thing about Nier Automata that either of you just got to talk about before we wrap this up?
I think I'm good. I think we covered the things that matter most to me.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's a million things you could talk about, but it just, you could be here all day. But I think the most important thing is that, like, the way this plot kind of goes and then climaxes with this beautiful ending is definitely, I think, one of my, if not the top, like, ending for a game for me, definitely one of my top 3.
It really just does such a good job at bringing the game's themes together and ending on a positive note. So with that, I guess as just our very last thing, like I think it's pretty clear where everyone stands on this game, but I guess just like I'm just going to each of you just your final thoughts on the game. I guess we'll start with Nate. Like, how'd you like the game overall, and like just final quick thoughts on.
Yeah, I mean my sort of wrap up thought on this game is basically that I'm just I guess you can be conflicted on like whether some of the mechanics are great or whatever, whether the side quests are worth it, whether there's any padding, normal stuff that we would criticize and talk about with video games. But I just think that Automata develops and portrays a narrative and a world and a set of themes in such a way that is far and above what most video games before have reached. And I find it very exciting to think that, like, at some point people are going to be writing very lengthy, I mean, some of this has already happened for sure, like very lengthy, in-depth, like academic breakdowns of the themes of Nier Automata, and like continuing that trend. Like there are going to be more games like this coming, following off of the success of this game. And I just think that's very, very exciting for the video game industry, but also just storytelling in general. Like I think it just does things that don't really exist elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. Garrison, how about you? What are your final takeaways?
Yeah, so building off what Nate said, I think there's a lot of things with the gameplay that you could definitely like find fault in. I think there's a lot of padding in the side quests aren't interesting. There's a lot of padding. Even the gameplay is probably not Platinum's best, but the narrative is what really drives that game. And I think it's definitely like it's a narrative that couldn't work as a book or as a movie. Like the player agency in that game is so important that I think it could only work as a game. So it's definitely like has some flaws from a gameplay perspective, but for me, the plot definitely overcomes those flaws and makes it, I think, one of my top. It's not like my favorite game of all time, but it's probably in my top 10 or pretty close to it. And so, I had another thought I was going to connect to that, and it just left my head. So I think part of what I do think could be better from a narrative standpoint is that the lore is really dense, and a lot of it's in all this side material. And so I wish some of it was made more explicit in the game itself. I think, we struggle to recall some of the finer details and figure out some of the things ourselves. I would have liked a more self-contained, like it can still, despite being a sequel to Nier, you can still follow that, but have some of those like plot things more self-contained, I think would have made it stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Because, I mean, even as we were going through this podcast, there were multiple times where we were just like, what was this again?
Yeah.
There's definitely a lot of density to it.
For sure.
That's often weird.
What are your final thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's a lot of expanding on what you two have said. And, like, I know a lot of us, not just us three, but on the ATACS in general.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I often get pegged as like quote unquote the gameplay guy.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. Like this of all the ATACS crew, I would not probably peg you as the most likely to enjoy Nier Automata.
Right, but I do the thing with Nier, and like I've never considered myself a gameplay guy. It's just like I don't think we should have to put up with quote unquote bad gameplay for like good cutscenes or something.
Yeah.
But I think what Nier, and I really like Nier Automata a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is for narrative reasons. But as Garrison said, I think its narrative works strong as a game narrative. And that's for me what works really well is like it's starting to remove, like so often in games we've had like, I'm so tired of the gameplay segment followed by cutscene.
Yeah, that's just a tired thing that shouldn't be happening anymore.
Yeah, and it's like it makes like that's where people start becoming a gameplay person or a story person or whatever, is because they're like that structure creates such a fine line between the two sides that don't overlap at all. And as much as I enjoy games like, I don't know, Wolfenstein 2, like
that's what that game is though.
That's what that game is, yeah. So but Nier, like to me, what's so impressive about Nier is it starts removing the line, because I want gameplay and story to be hand in hand, and I want there to not be like I feel like that's the potential of video games that we haven't really realized yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this game is one of the biggest steps towards that I've seen, especially from a AAA studio. There have been some indie games that have kind of experimented with that, and I think some successful ways. But this is like the first really big budget game I think that's made a cool move towards that. So that to me is like my big takeaway from what I like about this game.
For sure.
And I think a lot of that is from its structure. Like I think one of the game's central themes is cycles, and as we talked about, and I think like the game structure of the different routes and cycling through those like really feeds into the narrative in an interesting way. And like the player's participation in that is paramount. And I think also just like the things like Garrison was talking about way at the top of this thing about like kind of the atmosphere of the world and that kind of stuff. And we didn't really talk about the side quests, but like even if like the fetch questy part of them, some of them is not amazing, like being able to engage with that stuff yourself, I think fleshes out the world in a more real way than you would get if you just saw stuff in a cutscene or whatever. So yeah, I think the whole structure of this game is just, from a story standpoint, is fascinating. And then the way they integrate the ending, and even when it gets fourth wall breaking stuff like, deleting your save file, or even the way you save your game, like talking about that, uploading your memories, like they put a lot of flavor into just all the structural things of this game that that feel cohesive. And I mean, and I even like the story as a whole. Like I think its themes are interesting, and I mean, it's kind of almost more of a philosophy game in a way than like your typical action game would be. And I think it handles those themes really well. Like all that stuff we were talking about, the ending and like wrapping up its themes, I think is really well done. And it's very rare for games to convey themes with this kind of scope that well without just like bluntly saying things on the nose.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I think this game does a good job at making it something you feel more than are just told.
Mm-hmm.
And
Definitely.
like Nate was saying, I think this is definitely a game where you can have like people can write big like critical dissecting essays about and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's a really strong game. I mean, I do think the combat could be more enjoyable, but I'll take that knock against it.
It's perfect.
Yep. So yeah, we all like Nier. There's a lot more we could talk about, but I think that's going to be a wrap for the spoiler cast.
Yep.
It's a cool game. It's an interesting game.
And
if nothing else, this game
loud.
is very interesting. And if no one else has anything left to say, then that'll be a wrap. This has been a special spoiler cast edition of ATACS. We have been talking about Nier Automata. I am Flex, joined by Nate and Garrison. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.